Hey guys, it's Erica here with the Childcare Directors Share podcast. We are so thankful you tuned in today. If this is your first time tuning into our show, welcome. If you are one of our daily loyal listeners, we love you. We love you, love you, love you. Thank you so much for tuning in every day and supporting our podcast. So this is actually a second interview with someone from Canada. We know that we have so many listeners from Canada, and that support is amazing. And we wanted to make sure that we continue to bring content that was equally valuable to both our Canadian listeners and our US listeners. And of course, our listeners all over the place. But there's just so many of you, it just made sense to do that. The other thing is, I think it's so important for us to kind of come together collectively as a voice in ECE and support each other and learn from each other. And so that's why I thought this would be a great follow up as well. So we're going to hop into it. I have a guest today, and her name is Kayla, and I'd love to welcome her to the show. And I'm going to give her a minute to talk a little bit about herself. So welcome, Kayla.
Thank you so much for having me, Erica. It's so great to meet you too, finally in somewhat person.
Somewhat person.
It's nice when you're able to put a name to a face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll just dive right in then.
Dive in.
My name is Kayla Papalia, and I currently live in Port Moody, British Columbia, which is all the way in the west coast of beautiful British Columbia, a suburb of Vancouver. I'm sure everybody must know where Vancouver is or whereabouts it is. And I have been an early childhood educator. I want to say I'm coming up on 12 years now. But I would say I'd probably be an early childhood educator longer because I grew up in what is known here in Canada as a family childcare. So my mom had a childcare in our house when I was growing up that she still operates to this day. And in all my roles as an early childhood educator, I have worked for private childcares, I've worked for nonprofit childcares, and back in 2021, I decided to open, again, what's known here in British Columbia as an in-home multi-age childcare. So basically that means that I have opened my home to seven children, well, six children, because two are siblings, six families, seven children here in my home. And I've been doing that since 2021, and I love it. It's been amazing. It's been such a great way to be able to merge two things that I love, which is first, the ability to stay home. Secondly, the ability to, help serve families in the community, as well as continuously use my cap as an early childhood educator in a way that's not only going to help benefit children and families, but also gives me the power and the empowerment to be able to do things how I see fit.
I love that. I love all of that. So, and I'm so happy that you are a family child care provider, because we have a lot of listeners on the show that also run their own business from home, and there's so many ways to do early childhood education. And so I want to make sure that we have a voice for everybody and represent everybody to the best of our ability. So thank you so much. And I thought, I really wanted to talk about, and when we talked on Instagram a little bit, we thought, wow, this would be really cool to just kind of like talk about what are the differences between childcare practices in the US and Canada. And for me, my hope to get some insight is a little bit around, I have to tell you selfishly, a little bit around funding and how you guys do it there, because I know your government is pretty involved in the ECE field in terms of funding. Is that still true if you run a family child care center?
It is and it isn't. So I would like to preface this by saying that the motions and the movement that has happened in early childhood education since I want to say 2018, 2019, have been positive and have been beneficial. There have been some wonderful changes that have come about. And I would say that this is the first time ever, quite frankly, that we have actually seen government involvement and understood the importance of the early years for children and their families. Having said that, I would say that as an in-home multi-age operator, or if you run a private childcare sector, so meaning one that is not a non-for-profit, I would say that we still have a long way to go, because I don't think we are as valued or we are seen as important as the nonprofit sector.
Okay. I feel like too, when there's one style that is maybe looked at in a way that as preferential, I guess. I think it really should be family's choice as to what feels good for them, right? So you kind of take a little bit of that away, right? I think families should be able to pick what is the best setting, whether they want to do a smaller setting like a family childcare, because I like that intimacy of that, especially for young children, right? I totally get it. Or you want to do a small center, a mid-sized center, a large center, a franchise, like whatever feels right for you. Because at the end of the day, it is about the children, right? And
Absolutely.
right, yeah. So I think that that's important. I wanted to really explore the practices around how that works because my government is kind of getting into now, and I think you're right, probably around the same time, because it's been a global conversation. I feel like it's important to talk about because my government also is moving towards state funded pre-K and the push for universal pre-K in the US. And so that is like kind of a little bit all over the place. Yes, it's a good thing, like you said, um, to have more access for children and families and choices. But we have to figure out, like, how is it going to be funded? One of the things I learned was, and I'm not sure if this is exactly the case for you folks, but centers are still closing down because they don't have enough money because the money is maybe delayed or something to that aspect. Is that what you're finding there?
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly how it is because I believe you said that the person that you spoke to beforehand from Canada, not sure who that is, was based out in Toronto. So that's
Mm-hmm.
in Ontario,
Yeah.
which is a different province from us. But in British Columbia, what we have right now is something called the fee reduction incentive, or something else that is the $10 a day plan. In British Columbia and now Canada wide, they've been really pushing something called the $10 a day plan. And the essentially what it is the understanding and the hope that families would not be paying more than $10 a day for childcare. Again, that's a fantastic, wonderful thing. We don't want families to be playing an arm and a leg for something that is so essential, not only for children, but also for parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly women. We know that if women are able to access good quality, well-funded childcare that they're not
Mm-hmm.
paying so much out of pocket with, they're able to go back to work, they're able to go back to school, and our economy does better, which who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't like that? That's a fantastic thing. But again, the problem that I see is that it's prioritizing and demonizing, I want to say, and creating a divide really between what government is seeing as quality childcare and not quality childcare. So right now, from what I've from what I've seen and from what I've read and from all the town halls that I've been able to attend, there seems to be this idea that's being put forward that nonprofit is good and private is bad. And private, of course, also falls under, also falls women like myself who run in-home multi-age centers or women who run family child care centers. And so what I've been noticing is a lot of us who are running, these private centers, quote unquote, we're not being prioritized and we're not being understood as to why we have to charge the fees that we charge,
Mm-hmm.
on a month to month basis, depending on the age of the child. So, for example, let's say you have a child who is between the ages of 0 to 18 months, right? So, an infant. Let's say, to cover all the expenses that I would need to cover so that I could make my program run, I need to charge $1,200 a month for an infant, right? Well, now I have to apply for this fee reduction so that I'm able to, as an in-home multi-age childcare provider, receive $600 of that of that monthly cost, right? So $600 of that is going to be coming from the government, and $600 of that is going to be paid by the family. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the point of fee reduction is essentially what it says, to reduce the
Mm-hmm.
fees for families. But the problem that we're seeing is that they're lumping us all into this group of saying, well, you're not allowed to charge those fees. You need to keep your fees low. You need to keep your fees low. There's no understanding that childcare operations are not cheap, nor do
Hmm.
they come from nowhere, right? We need to charge a certain amount so that we can keep things going. It's not that we want to charge a ridiculous amount. And I would go as far to say that if you are a quality childcare provider, you understand that you don't want your families to pay an arm and a leg. But at the same time, we cannot get, we cannot escape the fact that it's expensive to operate and it has to come from somewhere. So I need to charge what I need to charge to be able to make my center run, but now I have, what we have here is the uh, Ministry of Education right now is where childcare is under. It's telling me that I can only charge set amount. So that means that now I'm not going to be able to maybe provide lunch program that I once had. I'm not maybe not be able to provide a snack program. I might not be able to give my educators a raise. I might not be able to do, so many different things because now I'm tied to a very limited fund in order to get this money to help my families out. And because of that, I personally have been noticing that a lot of centers are making the decision to close because they just cannot make things operate with the rules that are being set out at the moment.
Yeah, wow, there's a lot of things there. So the first thing is, they talk about trying to get people to work so they can work and help the economy, but most centers are women owned. Most teachers who work in those centers are women.
Mhm.
So it's almost contradictory in what we're saying and then what we're doing. And that's across the board. That's not just that's here in the US too. We're advocating for educators who had to get degrees, right? And had to do all of these things to make a living. But as you said, where's the money coming from? So maybe perhaps it isn't just, I think it's both. So I think we're missing half of the puzzle. So yes, the fee reduction for families, 100%. We're all on board.
Oh,
Where is that?
absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Where is the stability, the consistent stability fund to also pay the teachers what they deserve? And as you said, the overhead. And I don't know the actual expenses to run a family childcare, but I can tell you from a center perspective, they're pretty high. Like I don't have like, especially when you're renting. Like if you own a building, maybe it's a little bit easier. So I own a few buildings and then I rent some buildings, and rent keeps going up every year. Like our utilities here in the U.S. are insane.
Oh,
Yeah.
same in
So
British Columbia.
yeah. So it's yeah. So I think to have not only educators at the table, but financial experts, grant experts on how are we closing these gaps. So the centers that are closing, what is happening? Where are they going? Where are the children going? Where are the parents going? Where the teachers
Parents
going?
parents are getting stuck, and that's the sad reality. And that's one thing that I really have a beef with our current media right now. And this is where I'm going to sound like a crazy person, but our media is very one-sided, I've noticed, in the sense of we're just talking about how wonderful everything's becoming, but we're not talking about the problems that we're having at hand or who it's affecting. Because the sad reality is that, yes, centers are closing drastically. Educators are leaving in droves. We have an educator shortage here in BC. Never mind the rest of the country, but in BC alone, we have an educator shortage. And what's happening right now as well is the government solution to that doesn't seem to be, well, we should give higher wages, we should look at the problem, we should see what the root cause of everything. It's we're continuously slapping band-aids on broken legs, and the bubble is going to burst, and I'm very fearful of what that's going to look like when it eventually does. And the people who are suffering at the end of the day are children.
Yeah. I totally agree. So it seems like we are all globally having the same issues. The same thing is happening here. It's hard to get teachers. We have to be more creative in um, bringing in maybe people who aren't in the field, bringing kind of enticing them to come into the field. And I do also agree with the media part, except for here it's the opposite. I feel like on the media, all you hear every day here in the US is the childcare crisis, the childcare crisis, the staffing crisis, the staffing shortage. I can't remember last time I seen any good news about early childhood education in the media, right? So I do believe also it's one sided, but here it's kind of the opposite. And yeah, we do have certainly a child care crisis. There are child care deserts, as they call them here, where you can't even get into a center because there aren't any.
Mhm.
Or, there's like three in your city and they're all waitlisted for 8 years.
Oh
So you
yeah.
might as well just say that there's not, right? Um,
Yeah, it's the same issue here, right? I mean, we have crazy wait lists. Like me alone, I don't have any space, and that's assuming that I'll even have a spot open. I don't have any space open until September of next year.
yeah.
And even that's looking pretty slim. I personally don't think I will have any availability for September
Yeah.
of next year for any new families. And it's the same across the province. We have so many people and so many people on wait lists and desperately looking for childcare and saying, like, we've been calling since the mom
Mhm.
was, newly found out she was pregnant because her
Mhm.
friend or her whoever told her you need to start looking for daycare now. And there's almost no hope for them to be able to find childcare. And I mean, it's such a, like I said, it's such a situation and such a problem that is not as simplistic as we would like it to think it is. I mean, there's so much that goes behind it, right? I mean, I would love for the solution to be as easy as we need to have more educators, or we just need to put more money
Mhm.
here, or we need to do this, or we need to do that. But there's a root cause as to why we're having the problems that we are having. And unless
Yeah.
we can really focus on what that is, I personally don't see it getting to where we want it to be. And it's like you said, right? I mean, there are such wonderful advances that are happening right now, but it's not enough. And not, it's prioritizing certain centers or certain people and almost villainizing the rest of us. So what I've always said is the idea that's happening right now in BC is wonderful, but the execution is not the greatest.
Yeah. And I think I really wanted to talk about it because it does seem as though the US is kind of following suit in terms of the government getting in and funding early childhood, which again is important, but how are we going to do it where it makes sense for the millions and you think there's a shortage now? I'm telling you. I told parents at a parent meeting probably about a year and a half ago. And we were talking about, I don't know, we are talking about toddlers biting, which was so not really connected to what we were talking about now. But I said, I looked at the parent, I said, there are so many things going on in our field right now. Do you understand that the child care in our state is about to collapse? And she said, what do you mean? I said, this industry is about to collapse right now. Teachers are working their butts off. They are, this was like maybe a little bit towards the end of the pandemic, but wasn't quite there yet. I said, I am so happy that these girls are coming in every day. They are here every day for your kids, literally 8 hours, 9 hours a day. They are doing absolute the best that they can. Do you understand where we are right now? Like, I'm sorry, but I understand it's important to you. We're doing everything we can. And they really didn't. It wasn't really in the news as much as it is now. I think they had no clue. They had no clue. And I was like, this is why it's so important that we really help parents understand, because when parents understand, right? Because you and I, we have ulterior motives. We own our businesses. So people are going to look
Absolutely.
at that as like, well, of course you want us to fund your business. What other businesses do people fund? Okay. We get that we're privately owned. We get that, right? But when you get parents to advocate and parents involved, it's a different conversation because they ultimately are the end goal person to help, right? Them and their children. So when you get them saying, no, we want choice. No, we want to be able to go to a family provider, or no, I want to go to the small center down the road, or, or a church setting, or whatever, like whatever it is that they want, they should be able to have that and be able to pick what education, just like people do when the children are older,
Yeah.
right? You get to
Yeah.
pick, right? You get to pick. So what about, do you think like any cultural influences or anything influences the way that childcare is shaped or early education is shaped where you guys are? Are there any cultural influences, positive or negative?
Um, no, there's a question. Um, I would
Just in your
say,
experience.
yeah, definitely. I would say that in terms of philosophy, yes, definitely. It really is dependent on, yeah, I would say what it is that people are looking for, right? I would say certain cultures are definitely hoping for more academic style childcare centers, whereas others are looking for things that are more play-based.
Hmm.
And again, it's exactly like you said, right? It all comes down to choice. I think there are, and education as well, right? There are certain people who think that, children are, in order for them to be successful in life, need to have academics from the very beginning, right? So I know in certain areas here in British Columbia, there is a huge push for Montessori style childcare settings, right? But I always say Montessori is such an umbrella term here in British Columbia. I can either be the way that you see it with the mommy bloggers with the aesthetically beige houses, or it's an academic approach. There doesn't seem to be, at least in my opinion, and again, this is solely my opinion because I am not a Montessori educator by any means, but there seems to be no real understanding, I guess, as to what a Montessori program is. So there's a push for Montessori, but it's also dependent on what your interpretation of Montessori is. And then there is another push. So we seem to kind of have this like one or the other. There's also this huge push for a Reggio inspired approach,
Hmm.
right? Or a emergent curriculum
Yes.
inspired
Yeah.
approach. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all kind of agree that play based is a good way to go about it, but how that play happens, I guess, is where where not the divide, but the differing opinions happens.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Um, I think too the materials, what the materials are, how frequently are they offered, how
Yep.
much is teacher directed, how much is child directed.
I
I
would
think,
also say too, like who's, how what's the word I'm looking for? How comfortable parents are with risk play, like that's a huge thing,
yes,
right? Like
yes, right.
if you're going to the more like crunchy centers, for lack of better words, there is more. There's the opportunity for risk play, right? Where children
Hmm.
are encouraged to climb, they're encouraged to fall, they're
Yeah.
encouraged to do, I worked in a center years ago where we gave children power tools in a safe setting, mind
Sure,
you,
sure, of
but,
course.
but we showed them, right? Like this is how you use a screwdriver. This is how you, or not a
Use
screwdriver,
a
a
hammer.
power drill. This is how you use
Hmm.
this. And we showed them that, they were capable of doing these kinds of things so long as we taught them how to be safe with it. And then you have other centers where that's just absolutely a huge no-no because, what if a child gets hurt and we're going to have to deal with it and we're going to have to deal with angry parents. So we're just going to make everything safe and, so that nobody gets hurt or so we can minimize how many children get hurt because we don't want to deal with the consequences of a child getting hurt and B, an angry parent.
Yeah. So that really speaks to why choice is so important. You know,
Totally.
yeah. Um, what about um, what about parental leave? What does that look like where you are?
That is a question that I'm so glad you asked
Well, I
because
mean, since you just had a baby,
yeah,
that's why I
and
asked it.
and this is a great question because this is a huge issue that I had and something that I talk about with a friend of mine who is also an entrepreneur here in British Columbia, who's a mom of three children in the earlier sector of all things as well. So Canada is really well known for having parental leave, right? We give women 1 year or they can take up to a year and a half of
Hmm.
parental leave. And, we're very proud of ourselves because we offer that. That's wonderful if you qualify for it. I unfortunately did not qualify for parental leave, despite the
Hmm.
fact that I pay taxes and
Hmm.
that I have been working since I was 15. So that would be
Hmm.
what, 18 years of my life now.
Yep. Because you own your
I
own business, correct?
Yeah, and
Yep.
before then, right? I started working when I was 15 years old because I got a part-time job when I was in high school because I wanted to start making
Hmm.
my own money because I wanted to go out with my friends. So here in BC, when you pay taxes, you pay into something called employment insurance or EI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the point of EI is that if you ever needed, like if you got fired, I'm not fired from a job, but if you had to leave a job or for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason you needed something just to help supplement you while you are in between jobs, you would be able to tap into this money. Or you would be able to tap into it if, again, if you're going on a parental leave, right? I was told that I called uh, our Lord and Savior, which is in the U.S. I guess would be the equivalent would be the IRS. Here it's called the
Mm-hmm.
CRA, or the Canada Revenue Agency. So I called them up and I was like, "Hey, I'm about to have a baby. Um, I get maternity leave, right? This is all my information." And they told me that because I had not paid into this employment insurance for 2 years as a self-employed woman, I did not qualify to get maternity leave. And if you're a self employed person, much less a self employed woman, your maternity leave, if you qualify, you only qualify for 12 weeks. So 12 weeks for those of us who are self employed, if we even are qualified for it, but
Mm-hmm.
everybody else gets a year to 18 months.
Mm-hmm. So similar story here without the baby, but similar issues here. So if um, myself or my husband, because we're married, um, we're not able to collect unemployment or any benefits through unemployment because of that same issue. There's a tax they don't take out. And so, if God forbid we close our doors, and we found this out through the pandemic, we close our doors, or we had to close, or my husband becomes disabled because he is married to me. Because me and my sister own, yeah, me and my sister own our business together. Because he is married to me, he is not entitled to that.
That's
So
insane.
you or your spouse who is the owner cannot collect. So similar, ours is not around maternity leave, but the same similar situation for me here in the States. So we
That's
have no
insane.
access to any of those support services as a
That's
self-employed person.
See, I have to
Yeah.
say that thankfully that is where we differentiate because my husband is not self-employed. He works, for somebody, and
Mm-hmm.
thankfully I am able to get his benefits through work.
Mm-hmm.
So myself and our daughter were able to get his benefits, and if God forbid something ever happened, he is able to tap into whatever government service he is paying into right now. I unfortunately don't get anything, but he is
He does.
able
Yeah.
to get those things, and he is able to take a paternity leave if he wanted to. Thankfully for
Yeah.
us, we were able to make it work so that I didn't, I was able to take the time off for as long
Mm-hmm.
as I needed to, and that he didn't have to take that time off. So we were very fortunate and privileged in the sense that we were able to make that work, but it doesn't mean that I was still not happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So fun fact, our editor, Derek, is ready to have, well, I guess his wife, his wife, my niece, they're having a baby in a couple weeks. So that's very, very
Exciting.
exciting. They're first, and they're taking some time off as well. So very excited about that. So before we start to wrap up, let me ask you a quick question. Because you're certainly very passionate as I am about our the whole field. Tell me, what ways do you advocate where you're at, or what methods, or do you advocate? If you do, how? Like, talk to me a little bit about advocacy.
Yeah, definitely. So my advocacy platform is called EC Honestly, and that is on Instagram and Facebook, and that's where you can find us, or me, I should say. Um, and I am kind of known as a pot stirrer. I have upset many people because I like to speak my mind. I would hope in a respectful manner, and of course, when we have opinions, we are going to upset people, and not everybody is going to agree with us, and that's
Hmm.
fine. People are free to agree or disagree with me. I love having conversations, but I also don't like sugarcoating anything, and I believe that in at least here where I am geographically, let's say, we have created this culture of toxic positivity where we're almost not allowed to speak about why we're upset about certain things or why we disagree with certain things. And we're just supposed to be happy all the time and be grateful that things are not as bad as they were, which my answer to that is always, yes, I am thankful that things are moving forward, but we can still be critical. Let's call it critical about, how this movement is happening and who it's still not benefiting, and who's being prioritized and who's being looked down on, or who is not even being considered.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that we all should be using our voice. And I think too, I think always, because I do think about things very positively, but I think that all feedback is good feedback. And that's how we are able to grow. So the more voices that you get to the table and the more folks that are, giving some solutions, right? Because if everybody's at the table, like, yeah, this is great. I mean, it's not really working for everybody, then it's not great. So you do need to have all those different perspectives at the table. And I would say, family childcare is probably, I agree with you, probably the least considered. And then after that is after school programs, which is where I started. And the lady I was talking to earlier, she runs an after school program as well. And like we're like, like this, like the step kid of ECE, like we don't know where we really quite fit in, right? We're not with the youth folks and we're not in the ECE spot. We're like right somewhere in the middle. So I think it's important to have all of those folks at the table. So
Definitely.
thank you so much. This has been so fun and interesting. I really love learning about what's going on in Canada. And I do think that we can continue to work together and learn from each other and figure out how do we solve this, because this isn't a US problem or a Canada problem. This is a global issue, and one that we need to continue to fight for and advocate, because our kids are worth it and our communities are worth it. And that's at the end of the day, that's why I'm here. That's why you're here. And that's why we keep showing up. So
Absolutely.
yes. So we're going to put your link down below in our show notes so folks can check out your podcast. And I just want to say to my listeners again, thank you so much. I am so humbly grateful for all of your support and tuning in day after day. Like, I don't even know, you guys talk to me and listen to me more than my family sometimes. They're like, stop talking about ECE. I'm like, I can't. I'm obsessed. I'm sorry.
When you're in
So
ECE,
guys,
you're not stop.
yeah, nonstop. You get it. So it is the little things, the little details that make a big impact in the success of your child care business. That's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, have a great day.